I think what also makes it unique, not just the history of it, John, but it has the chance to be the game of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, from a star power standpoint, I mean, there are star players at positions all over the place in this game, and that's a huge part. Looking back to the '90s, was they were all pros at all different positions. Like part of getting a sweet rivalry going at the highest level and then playing again in the playoffs is having Pro Bowl level players, having all pro level players. Now, typically in football, you get a great rivalry with two quarterbacks, Manning versus Brady, Rodgers versus those guys, Roethlisberger versus those guys. This, Jimmy and Dak, to me, what's crazy, you would say that Jimmy's pretty famous, but Dak, I guess, would be the more accomplished player as like a thrower. They, to me, are not the headliners of this game, though. Because to me, the Cowboys aren't defined by Dak Prescott this season, really, even though he had a good year. And the Niners 100% are not defined by their quarterback. I mean, which makes this game kind of unique, right? When you look at some of these other games, I mean, the Raiders and Bengals, when you think about those two teams, the Bengals, you think of Joe Burrow, right? In the Raiders, hell, you're thinking Derek Carr right now. The Bills, Josh Allen. Tampa Bay, obviously Tom Brady. In this game, I mean, when I think the 49ers, I think Kyle Shanahan. And when I think Dallas Cowboys, and this is probably different than in the 90s in the peak of the rivalry, like Jerry Jones has become a lot more famous since in his role in the league. But you think Jerry Jones. I mean, you were telling me about his comments with the kicker. I was typing in, some Cowboy stuff into Twitter just to like search for some information. And it's Jerry giving quotes about the kicker being inconsistent. That's not. Is there another owner this week talking about players on his team?
No. I mean, Silent Stan, that's what the soccer fans of the team that he owns call him, because you never see him.
I've never seen a Stan Kroenke quote in all my years of just following the NFC West.
I mean, maybe you'd hear from Kraft, right? But that's it. That's the only other person that I think might talk. I mean, Mark Davis, I guess, maybe.
When does Mark Davis ever talk?
I don't know. I just see him sometimes, but I guess it's at league meetings when they've got him by an elevator. Is Mike Brown the owner of the Bengals?
Yeah.
Okay. But he doesn't. I don't feel like he's talked since Hard Knocks.
He's not a talker.
So yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I think the way you described it, though, in terms of like there are two teams that can't win without their quarterbacks playing well.
Yeah, I'm not. Obviously, it's a sport of football. You need your quarterback, but they are the Cowboys more because they have a passing offense. I mean, they depend on Dak Prescott. The 49ers want Jimmy just to be a role player. Now, there are moments in games like last week where he needs to be more than that, and he's proven that he can. But Jimmy is not, even when he's on, I would say, like the star of the team. The offense, what would he, in terms of talent? Trent Williams, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, right?
Yeah.
Hell, Ayuk.
Yeah. I mean, Deebo finished 5th in the league in receiving yards, even though he's 25th in receptions, which is pretty crazy. I also just think on a basic level, right? Dallas, I saw somebody put this in the chat. Dallas was 6-0 against its division, which is not a good division.
Well, they won that game. I mean, a couple weeks ago, that Sunday night game, they were up like 80-0. Remember that game against the football team?
Yeah, and then they scored 51 against the Eagles on Saturday. Now, I know nobody really cared about that game, but they scored 51 points.
On the road.
I know it was Minshew. They scored 51 points. So, but at 12-5, to me, I wonder with them, and this might be unfair. They're the highest scoring offense in the NFL.
Cowboys?
It's a franchise record. Now, it's hard, right? Everyone's playing an extra game this year. But they scored the most points they've ever scored in Cowboy history.
I do wonder.
And by the way, they had scored the most points before they even played Philly. They'd done it after 16 games.
This is where I would say I wonder if their division played a part because, like you said, the Eagles game, they scored 51 points. Now, the Eagles somewhat threw the game. Not that the Cowboys wouldn't have beat them because they played them earlier and kicked the shit out of them. But 51 points. The 2 weeks before against the football team, 56 points. So in 2 of their last 3 weeks, they scored 56 and 51, and both of them have been against the NFC East. Giants football team, 21-27. It just feels like they score a lot of points against. They scored 44 against the Giants. They scored 41 earlier this season against the Eagles. Like they've racked up some points against the NFC least, as some say.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though they did get 2 teams in, I am a little uncomfortable with how, I think it's a function of everybody saying for a month, the Niners are the team you don't want to see if you make the playoffs. Then they made the playoffs. And so, I think the Niners can be a little bit of a popular pick. But I just think that I don't think you're getting that 50-point Dallas offense. And I don't think Dallas would expect to get a 50-point. That's just the playoffs can be different. But I do think it's going to be hard. I think the strength, the idea that the Niners' strength is running the ball, that the Cowboys' defensive weakness is run defense, that the Niners, if we're going to break their defense down into strength and weaknesses, their secondary is their weakness. And that obviously is a strength for Dallas, right? And so I think there are just some things here that play into both teams being able to have some success and making it an exciting game. Now, ideally, if you're the Niners, you don't want to get into a game with, 5 possessions per team per half with Dallas. Because to me, I think the more if both quarterbacks have to throw a lot, that favors Dak probably. But it's not like Dak's, I love Dak. He's one of the easiest guys to root for in the league. I think where it hurts though is just, I think both teams can get after the quarterback, and that's where it could get a little weird for both the Niners and the Cowboys, right? What's Trent's health, Micah Parsons, the Niners. One of the more, I don't know if it's underrated, but I think one of the more impressive parts of watching them every week is their ability to just create chaos in the pocket.
Well, I think the thing that makes Micah Parsons so awesome is they got him at pick 12. Looking back, he didn't play his junior year at Penn State, so it was a little out of sight, out of mind. And he still ended up going, without playing, went 12th overall. If he had played, he might go top 5. He might have been the 4th overall pick after the quarterbacks. Because I think what Micah Parsons is what Will Anderson is. And if Will Anderson was draft eligible, do you know that Will Anderson would be easily the number 1 overall pick in the draft?
I do know.
And when you watch Will Anderson play, and maybe they're a little different, but I actually think they have a lot of similarities. Like Will Anderson just fucking running everywhere, making tackles, sacks. There was one play in the national championship where he got off the ball and Herbstreit was like, "Did he get offsides?" They're like, "No, he just timed it perfectly." And you just watch Micah Parsons, there is like a physicality, a speed, a burst. They put him over center in the guard. He stands up outside. He plays linebacker. He just does it all. That makes this game the more good players that are in a game, the more I'm into. That's why last week was cool. They were just star players in that Rams-Niner game. That's what playoff games are.
It'll look good on TV.
Awesome. It'll look awesome. And I saw that Cowboys were putting out maybe definitely Cowboy fan blogs. Do not sell your tickets. Do not sell your tickets. Because the one thing is the Niners, I would imagine their household income of their fans that are willing to travel might be a little higher, and they're willing to buy some of these tickets. And some of these people, I'm not a season ticket holder. You're not either, but I know people that are. Not even just with the night, just in general. And I could understand if you pay, I'm just going to pick an even number, $1,000 for a year of season tickets for whatever. That's probably way low, but I'm just pick the number.
Yeah.
And you can get on 80% of it back in one game. And you're like, I couldn't even make it anyway.
Yeah. My neighbor told me he sold his seats, right? I think it was $1,000 for the PSL, each one. So to your point, you can make your PSL and make money in 1 year.
You're saying he gave up his PSLs?
He gave up his seats. And, I think that you're right. I think it happens a lot. I think it'll happen a little bit on Sunday. That? Didn't seem like it.
Kind of a trek to get down there.
Yeah, he's got a young kid now. He's like, I go to the Zoom now more than I go to football games. But, or maybe it was 2000. I don't remember. Whatever it was. But it,
if the team was good, it'd be easy to sell them, but it takes effort.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the younger fans that I've interacted with are underestimating the history of this a little bit. And I was listening to a Cowboy podcast, and one of the guys, the Locked On Cowboy podcast, and one of the guys was like, I don't even think about those old games. Which I get. But I think from a TV product, I think it's going to be, and it should be, a big part of what you see. I think if you've grown up watching any football, you see these two uniforms, famous photos of Emmitt Smith sitting there in the mud, right, head down on the sideline, Dion and Michael Irvin going toe to toe, Steve Young and Troy Aikman. I mean,
wasn't there a famous game? Not a famous game because it was a regular season game, and it was where Tony Romo played with like a, because Witten played with like a spleen.
That's when he threw the walk-off touchdown to the guy that had been on like the TV show, wasn't it?
Yeah, that had the dreads. Didn't Tony Romo play hurt against the 49ers at Candlestick? Yeah, and beat him. That might have been the year before Harbaugh got there. It might have been a Singletary year, but it was pretty legendary. Like, Tony Romo shouldn't play in this game. And he did it, and then he hit that guy, that had been in like the big break, but for football.
Was it like Dion's show? Wasn't that what it was?
Pros versus Joes?
Not Pros versus Joes. It was like I thought Dion was part of that show, like, making the league or so, like making the band, but making the league.
I remember the guy was a reality TV guy, but then he got a shot. Maybe they just worked him out. Yeah, it was Harbaugh's first season. You're right.
Yeah. The rib game. What was that guy's name? Anyway,
I mean, his last name was Wilson.
The catch Monday was 40 years since the catch. That was the Cowboys.
But I think part of the problem is because you're saying that people don't. From a broadcast standpoint, they're going to utilize it. I just don't. I mean, think how long ago 1993 was or whatever. I understand young Aikman, and those guys are still really famous, and it's a big deal. It's just a long time ago. Like, Harbaugh was 10 years ago now,
No, it's true, but I think we underestimate
Jesse Hawley.
Someone said it was Michael Irvin's show. I think we underestimate how much history plays into sports, even if it's history we're not totally aware of. I think there's just like a pressure that gets created, that there's just something there that isn't there for every game. And I think it was there for Niners-Cowboys in the Harbaugh era. I think it'll be there forever in the same way it'll be there forever with the Red Sox and the Yankees. It doesn't mean everybody has to remember it, but I think there's just enough people that are aware of it that it kind of there is a passion that comes from that. This is like the most basic thing, one of the most basic elements that makes sports great. I mean, it's like one of the things. You don't have to be an SEC fan or be in the SEC country to feel a little extra when two SEC teams play each other in the national championship game.
No, for sure.
So I don't think it's I don't think it's escapable. Whether you remember the Niners-Cowboys games of the 90s, of the 80s, of the 70s, or you remember none of it. I don't think you can escape that element. Is just in this rivalry.
Well, I was thinking today, do you think Kyle Shanahan would even bring up how much this game means, or is that not something that you even want to talk about stuff back from the 90s? Because why would you just want your players focused on the present?
Yeah, I don't think it means anything necessarily to them in that regard. I'm with you. We're doing this one for Ricky Waters. This is for
fucking Jesse Hawley when he was running down Candlestick. That's bullshit.
Jesse Hawley, Floyd.
He was the winner of Michael Irvin's football reality show, Fourth and Long, and received an invitation to attend Dallas. They did a reality show for an invitation to go to Dallas training camp. Now,
it was specifically a cowboy show.
Specifically a cowboy show. This guy had played at the University of North Carolina and had been in training camp with the Bengals. He had played in the Canadian Football League, so it's not like Haberman or MIDDLEKAUFF just showed up there to try to make Dallas Cowboys. Like, it makes sense why this guy won it. But before being on Fourth and Long, he was working as a security guard as well as selling cell phones in North Carolina. And that was in 2009. So he made the team and stayed around for a couple years. Pretty incredible story by Michael
Amazing.
Irvin. I don't think it gets enough. That's the type of story that shouldn't just die as easily as it did.
Kurt Warner got a movie?
I know.